I'm not a pessimist. I've always had a great deal of faith in people, that we wouldn't succumb to frenzy or rage or greed, that we figure out a solution without destroying the things that we love.
I live in the upper Delaware River Basin. The year that I was born, 1972. It was also the time when all the great American environmental laws were born under the Nixon administration. Between 1970 and 1974, they created the EPA, passed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and then sometime later then the Superfund law. And also in Pennsylvania, they adopted Article 1, Section 27 of the Constitution of Pennsylvania, which was Pennsylvanians' right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment into the future. So, in 2008, in April, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a natural gas company. It told me that my land was on top of a formation called the Marcellus Shale, and that Marcellus Shale contained natural gas, and that they'd invented a new technique called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. It was pioneered by Halliburton, but that many different gas extractive companies were using it, and that with this technique called fracking, they could get natural gas reserves out of shale, out of rock formations and tight sands and places they could never get it from before. And that this fracking was going to revolutionize energy around the world. And I looked at this and I was like, there's no oil and gas production in this area. You know, it's a watershed area. So I'm going to give you a look at the stream near my house that feeds the Delaware River, if you can roll the next clip.
I'm not sure how many of you have direct experience with streams.
Turn the clip
When I was growing up, you could run up and down the stream for miles.
But the gas industry assured me, there's going to be no problems. This is just a fire hydrant in the middle of the field, and you're going to make a lot of money. They offered us $100,000 for 19.5 acres. That was the signing bonus, and a portion of the royalties of the gas that would come out of the ground that could be negotiated later. So then I started to look around, and I noticed that everybody around me was getting these letters in the mail, all my neighbors. And then I found out that it was the whole county. And then I found out it was actually 65% of the state of Pennsylvania, 50% of New York State, half of Ohio, and all of West Virginia. And that I didn't know this, but we were in the middle in the United States of the largest onshore natural gas drilling campaign in history. And it was going on in 34 states. And maybe you want to show them the slide. These are the places in America which are being drilled or being leased. So, around about that time, my neighbors started to tell me a little bit about the process. They were doing some research. They said hydraulic fracturing is very weird. They drill down, they torque the bit, they go all the way down to the formation, and they force down the well bore 2 to 7 million gallons worth of water at incredibly high pressure, and that pressure breaks apart the rock formations. And in that process, they use up to 600 different chemicals, and that those chemicals are, in many cases, carcinogenic, neurotoxins. They have surfactants, benzene, all sorts of nasty things that you don't really want to be forcing down into the ground. And they were in a panic because the entire area was being taken over by these leases, and a lot of people had leased already. So I figured, someone had to be lying. It was either my neighbors or it was the gas industry. I went to a nearby town about 60 miles away where they've been doing this drilling for about 4 months. That's it, just 4 months. A place called Dette. I found the place completely overrun by Halliburton trucks, an atmosphere of fear. People were worried. It had industrialized this tiny little town. And then on New Year's Day, 2009, a woman named Norma Fiorentino's water wells exploded, just spontaneously combusted, blew up through the concrete casing into the air, and people started to talk to each other at church. They said, "You notice anything funny about your water?" One person said, "Yeah, my water's bubbling and fizzing. My driveway is bubbling. My water is brown, it's green, it smells bad. And you know what? My kids are getting sick. And my cats are losing their hair." Let's run the clip from Dette. Just a little clip from Dette.
Our next trip was just up the road to Ron and Jean Carter's. They had a gas well in their front yard. Shortly after the well was drilled, the water started bubbling and fizzing. It turned out to be natural gas.
I told them that I wasn't happy, that our water was good before they started drilling. And when they got done, it was bad. We said, asked if we could prove that it was because of them. And my wife asked the guy if he could prove that it wasn't. He wouldn't talk to her anymore.
So, of course, they've got natural gas in their water, and I hear that there are some people who can light their water on fire. So I go over to the people's house that can light their water on fire, and they say, we're sorry, the gas company disconnected our water supply, and they brought us replacement water, and this starts happening. People's water gets replaced, and they put them in big tanks outside, which is a good thing, because if your water is flammable, you could blow up your house while you're in the shower. And, you know, but the gas company all the while said, oh, we're just being good neighbors. We're just being good neighbors. This isn't really our fault. We're just giving you water. And then I started to hear about people who could light their water on fire where hydraulic fracturing was going on in Alberta and in Colorado and in Texas and Louisiana and Wyoming. So I got in the car. I took the banjo. The banjo's a good ambassador. When you're going on a road trip, you need a friend that knows when to shut up and when to be really, really loud, you know. And I went out to Colorado, and I found a group of people, and you'll see one of them right here, who can light their water on fire. So let's roll that clip.
Whoa, Jesus Christ. That's the best I've done. I smell hair. Oh, damn.
It's amazing the sense of humor you can have, right? Some of these people were afraid to get in the shower, you know, because the light fixture in the bathroom would spark, possibly, and blow their house apart. And then I went to Wyoming and found that the situation with the water was just as bad in the air. Because when they're doing this fracking, they're venting off huge clouds of God knows what. Benzenes, toluenes, volatile organic compounds, natural gas itself, methane venting right off into the air. I met farmers, cowboys, ranchers, people who had been completely overrun by this process. And I went to a lot of towns. I went to about 24 states. Same story, repeated over and over and over again. Water contamination, air pollution, health problems, things like cancers, brain damage, peripheral neuropathy, all sorts of strange illnesses. So I realized that I was making a film, and we had to rush it into production if we were going to do anything about this in the Upper Delaware River Basin and in the New York City watershed. It got picked up by HBO, where it was beamed into 40 million homes. I think it was on HBO here in Canada also. I just opened it in Australia last week and toured with it. And we had two objectives. One of the objectives was to actually achieve kind of a tipping point. Because natural gas is marketing itself as this clean burning fuel. And I'll say more about that in a second. But we wanted to show that natural gas is not clean, that it's dirty. And what's happening here is the irrevocable contamination of water supplies all over America and really significant air emissions. And when you take into account all of the venting of methane into the atmosphere and that it's 21 times the potency of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you're actually rivaling coal in terms of the emissions of the entire life cycle of the process. So if you're one of those people that thinks natural gas is actually a way out of climate change, you're actually wrong. We wanted to say that. But that really wasn't enough. Because, you know, being on television and HBO and all those things, it actually is just one part of inspiring action. So I went on the road, starting in about April, to take the film to all the affected communities, as many of them as I could. The first stop on the trip was a place called Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is a town of 30,000 people. And I got there, and it was like a cold and rainy April night, and we're at the Pizza and Pasta with the organizers, and I figure I'm happy if like 100 people show up, you know? And they said, well, Josh, we think it's going to be more. And I said, well, how many more? 1,600 people showed up to watch the movie that night, one night. It's like 3 to 5% of the town, for those of you who do math. And the same thing kept happening all over the United States. And I went to Texas, I went to Colorado, I went to Wyoming, I went to Louisiana, huge crowds all over the place. And they came with their water samples in their hands, with this kind of desperation, wanting their truth confirmed. And the night the film opened on HBO, there was an attack document put out by the gas industry. They were attacking the facts of the film. They went out there and they said, oh, these people could light their water on fire before we got there. I'm not kidding. And I learned later from Doug Shields, the great council member in Pittsburgh, that if the media hears somebody walk into the room and reports that the sky is green and there's nobody else in the room, then the report is the sky is green, And if someone rushes in right after that and reports that, no, the sky is blue, then the report's going to be, well, the facts are being debated. Right? And this is a tactic. It's a tactic that you might, familiar for climate change. The facts are being debated about climate change. Right? The facts are being debated about fracking, hydraulic fracturing. So when we did these screenings out on the road, it was like a place for people to actually confirm the truth that they knew. Because as much mediation as we all go through, there's still that basic work of getting out in front of people and talking about things, and that really worked. We've done that, 6, 9 months. What month is it? It's almost December, so a while. And that's been really amazing. Because there's a kind of desperation, but also a kind of poetry. And what I found was that this was really the gambit of the fossil fuel industries. And they'd actually gone to Congress and gotten themselves exempted from the Safe Drinking Water Act, from the Clean Water Act, from the Clean Air Act, from the Superfund law. And that all these exemptions allow this process to actually work, to be profitable. Because if they had to clean up after their mess, there would be no way of actually making a buck doing it this way. So it seems like there's this big dinosaur, right? And it's flailing around inside of a museum. It's smashing everything in its wake as it's dying. And that's the fossil fuel industry, because we know we could be going towards renewables right now. But natural gas is getting in the way, and that this is the battle. It's the fight between this form, which is now all over Canada, being exported as a success, an American model, to Australia, where they're planting 40,000 gas wells all along their agricultural production stretch. And Europe, Africa, South America. This is the shale gas revolution. But on the other hand, you have this tour, you have these people who've been watching the movie. And it was like walking into a room in my house and finding a couple 100,000 people there, So this is like one of those David and Goliath stories. And I have a lot of faith in what may happen. In every single town in that 50% of New York, and in every single town, there is a grassroots organization that has sprung to life in response to this crisis. And I think when you think about David and Goliath stories, right, you think about hardship and against the odds and how arduous it is and how unadvisable it is to do that. But you kind of forget that David won. Right? And last week, Governor David Paterson in New York said, a year ago, we thought that hydraulic fracturing was going to be a good idea. But the grassroots organizations and all of their opponents have made it really clear that we can't go forward with this process, even though there's $1 billion a year at stake for New York. So, it's a good sign, right? It's not over yet.